comprendre parce que je parle français, mais...
I am sure you will understand. Yes, so the booth is ready. I hope you enjoyed your coffee break. We have Mrs. Emna Zaharouni, who's going to to give a presentation. She is a bit late, so we'll listen to Madame Kefi instead.
Madame Christiane Welfens-Ekla, modératrice. Et Nagwa Hassan. Allez-y, j'y vais.
Dear sisters session, and we will deal with our first theme, duration. Before that, allow me to first the organizing committee, and namely Mrs. Saida Fitouri, making all efforts for the success of this first meeting, first too late, and to thank all our sisters who have shared with us these messages are strong, and we must take them with us home. I will find the idea of our Tunisian sisters. So if you have the decoration of the podium, you will rather, if you see the clothes of the dresses of our sisters from Côte d'Ivoire, you will see that it thank our Tunisian sisters for having the original idea of using this. And you see, make is to use this tissue, use it everywhere in our different countries, at least in our African countries. So thank you, Tunisia. So Clara, congratulations for this great idea. According to our agenda, we will have 3 speakers and 3 presentations with information our discussions. So we will first give the floor to, so the first presentation to Mrs. Faiza Kefi, So Emna Zahruni will towards women, and then the second presentation will be made by Mrs. Faizak. To have her next to me, because she is the mother of So Optimism Tunisia. Well, she is so she will talk about women and climate change, which is a very interesting topic, and will give a presentation about the needs and the justifications related to this. So without further delay, I call our discussion session before lunch. So Mrs. Faiza Kefi is going to thank you, Christiane. Thank you for this very good presentation. Is not really known by everyone. This is a complicated issue related to serious scientific topics and very far future forecasts. It is at the same time serious and for the present, as we are trying to avoid future. So before dealing with the issue of women in particular, I thought it would be useful to talk about climate change. I wanted to say that first at the planetary level, before talking about women and the consequences of climate change on women, Earth is going through a global warming process, occurring in sort of occurring at a very quick, rapid pace, and we've never recorded such high temperatures since the end of the last century, according to scientific projection hypothesis models. The average increase of the global 0.8 Celsius degree to 4 degrees, and this may seem trivial, but they will have real consequences on the climate of the ocean and sea levels to 70% before 100. So we won't be here, but our children, I hope our children will have the opportunity to live negative effects. We will also have an increase of gas emissions, and the greenhouse gases will increase already increased by 70% since 2000. Expect an acceleration of these phenomena for the future years. These changes will obviously have socio-economic and shown in the United States that climate changes will have consequences on the people. We will have an important demographic mobility. We will change so all life modes will be deeply affected and changed. This study has also the extent and the degree of climate changes that will affect international programs, environmental programs have mobilized states and world opinions on this phenomena and the related risks of many countries. The two most important objectives first concern the effort to be made in order to mitigate the climate change effects by reducing it to adapt. And you will see in the document on climate change two terms. Key terms and the objectives of UN works and studies and programs on mitigate the speed of climate climate change, and preparing these, therefore, quantitative objectives are determined. For instance, now we have an international agreement. Increase at the global level would not be above 2 Celsius degrees. I have said that everyone agreed in order to make more efforts and reduce the average increase recorded during the 90s. The second objective is to must not continue with the same quantity and rhythm of emission. Link is therefore established at 2 horizons, 2015 and a second for 2050s. Still far, but it's 2015 is only in 2 years' time, and for 2015 we'll feel and experience the real effects of greenhouse gas emissions. United Nations did not stop at determining quantitative objectives, but they have also established the means in order to reach these objectives. For this purpose, they have established and determined financing opportunity, the NAMAs, which means National Appropriate Mitigation Action, which for well-determined projects, and each country will present the project to get these funds. There are also some funds for technology transfer and followed, and this shows a will to continuously provide funding. So at the level of monitoring and control states, when sign agreements, accept also to report to international task force. Reports are provided on the efforts for greenhouse gas emission reductions, as well as with the concrete qualitative and quantitative results. However, as we all know, the international community is not making all the due efforts, and everyone agrees that climate changes need the collaboration of countries to collaborate with the developing countries, because each country has to commit to reduce their gas emissions, and I think that the taller countries caused by induced by the cost of gas emission reductions, it is developing countries. Otherwise, they would not be able to develop in this direction. So developed form of climate solidarity or environmental solidarity, and therefore help developing countries to reduce their gas emissions in a more moderate way than the conference. The Doha conference of 2012 was disappointing. I have myself provided a report of the Kyoto results, and I can say that this conference was totally disappointing. At the end. We could not obtain all what it requested from the international community, namely the obviously, the most industrial and developed and energy-producing countries produce the highest levels and the highest rate of greenhouse gas. Also wanted to negotiate the level of the required ready to comply with it. So with the hope of an international governance of climate change, most emitting countries were really below the expectations. The impacts of climate change are very important. So to mention a few examples, are totally scary. And to give you some examples, we will have an increase of dryness periods. So we will have more dryness for longer term, mainly concerning Mediterranean and Maghreb region. We will also have an increase of floods. Water would be in excess, so we will have the two extremes, and whenever we have excess, so it means floods and the destruction of houses, the displacement of and dislocation of families, with obviously children and women going in all their disasters, and we have seen some of them from the beginning of the century with a stronger intensity. And this is the experts, and experts have worked in order to list the consequences as well as their impact on the population's lives and on the environment. The African continent is extremely vulnerable to high dependence on highly so it is the case of Tunisia, and it is one of the environmental at the environmental level. We all know the consequences of affected people in so how it affected 20 million of African people in 2000 is confirm that climate change will worsen the extreme natural phenomena in Africa. This tendency, according to ASPE, to highlight, this was highlighted during the debates of Japan in 2008, the Second Partnership Forum, and we have climate change on the evolution and the development and achievement of the Millennium Development. MDG goals will be affected, or urgent measures are not adopted. So we mentioned the objectives related to poverty reduction, to infant mortality and reductions, object to gender equality. If in general many countries have made considerable efforts in order to by undertaking diagnosis and studies on the specific effect on their populations and socio-economic future situation. However, no country has any in order to face these consequences. It is also the case for a while on the case of Tunisia, which could be the case of any country represented here today. So even if we have a very low greenhouse gas emission level, a number of mitigation measures covering many sectors, namely energy and industry, mention among these measures a strategy established 10 years ago and which concerns strategy interested me as it included capacity building, clean development projects. So the purpose is to avoid any pollution risks induced by any economic or industrial activity. The purpose was also to build sustainable development, so to have an economic and industrial activity without carbon emission on climate change, and it provides a list or an inventory of gas greenhouse with the peak emissions. It also provides the geographic level, so it can be the coastal. It is actually the case of coastal areas. Population categories which are affected, and these are the poor women in general. So in Tunisia, we will have an important problem distribution as the rate of salinity will be higher than the past rate. And we will have, obviously, to provide more. It focuses on mitigation measures. So the climate change consequences are clearly announced in Tunisia. We will have an increase of average temperatures, mainly during the fall and summer seasons, an increase of dryness periods, a strong variation between dry and humid periods. A few days ago that in Egypt we project a progression of the sea, a progression of 100 kilometers in Egypt. So you imagine the consequence in seawater and sea levels. So for Tunisia, this increase by 2030 will be from the next century. Many islands also risk to be totally submerged. So this affects water resources, ecosystems, and so more about the consequences, which are very important. But I draw your attention on the issue of what is consequence of climate change, and especially for Africa, where the salinity degrees will affect the water quality and the water resource. Due to temperature increase, we will have the appearance of new diseases, more forest fire, more desertification, and towards the north and towards the Mediterranean, we will have an increase of the vulnerability of coast. Tunis, the capital, can, due to the increase of due to sea, to lose 25% of its economic potential. At the horizon of 2050 will be lost, and it will be recorded more at the level of the northern suburbs of Tunis. So without this is added to the that will appear due to the atmospheric pollution. As it is the case, change on women is not considered in any of the reports I have mentioned. Women are totally absent in the strategies in terms of climate change. So the report of Women and Development different whether for men and women. These effects, these changes will increase cities of men and women. However, these are not analyzed and they are not taken into consideration in the women suffer or die more than men. Their family responsibilities make them more natural resource access. They obviously they don't have precariousness and vulnerability by increasing risks for the poorest, and deforestation make women obliged to work more in order to gender inequalities, and in case of natural disasters they don't have action of women during tsunamis have shown that there are many women we never taught them to swim nor to climb trees. It was against the traditions, and therefore there was no equality in terms of teaching and education. So mobility conditions for women, as they are therefore unable to escape from the dangerous areas. their clothes can be an obstacle, and in Bangladesh women died because they were wearing very heavy dresses, and therefore the mortality risks increase. United Nations Environmental Program entitled Women in the Frontline of Climate describes the dangers facing women during very serious and violence are real threats for women. It occurred in Africa, in Asia, and in Latin America. Climate disasters disorganize the family organization network, expose them to many risks. Real organized and the trafficking groups are there to try to have, let's now try to have a more optimistic their knowledge, their experiences, and the role they play are very important for many fields, mainly resource management and for the different ecosystems. Women can also become real change agents and therefore contribute the strategies for the decrease of climate change negative impacts, national strategies which are elaborated in order to face climate change. The United Nations environmental recommendations in this regard. So it invites states to recognize the real value of women and political processes because they are real development actors and they are fully involved to target women, and it insists on gender equality in order to ensure the success of natural resource allocations. We need to improve the life conditions of women, improve their access to natural and development resources such as loans, to improve information sensitization as well as the access to new technologies. Green gender-sensitive technologies, mainly for the catchment of water resources. All countries to carry out a systematic analysis and to develop researches on women and climate change approach, relying on gender equality in order to quickly remedy the information as well as in the research field. We need to guarantee an enabling environment for women participation and strategy elaboration, implementation, and decision-making processes. We have to ensure target the vulnerability and gender violence risks as well as the natural disasters. These are the recommendations included in the report. After the last meeting held in Cairo in 2012, it was a very interesting meeting, and if you have internet access, you can write Women and Climate Change. Cairo's meeting was a very crucial and important meeting point for climate change issues. So this was my presentation on women and climate change. We are very far role, while, however, they are totally absent from political strategies and policies. Thank you for your...
Merci beaucoup, Faiza.
Thank you, Faiza.
Thank you, Faiza, for sharing all this information. I think that she started with for optimism, and I think that things will hit top during the debate. So now I would like to give the floor to Amna Zaghoni. So let me give the founding I would like to introduce Emna Zaharoun, optimist. This is the first time she hears about showing optimism, and she has accepted about gender-based violence. Emna is a lawyer, and she's a human rights specializing in the rights of women, and she has been involved in consultations and coaching within the framework of the Orientation and Counseling Center Victims, which belongs to the Tunisian Association of Democratic Women. So let me give the floor to Emna. Good morning. Today I will talk about violence in the penal code in Tunisia. Today we'll try to read critically this legislation in Tunisia. Before 2006, we did not speak about, according to the Tunisian authorities, it's something that did not exist in Tunisia. And we set up a strategy at the national level against violence. The strategy was a field survey. The results of the survey appeared in December 2010 and have been at least once in their lives victims of violence. After later did not really undertake any action, and no change was noted in the Tunisian legislation in 100 years, and it has remained very conservative, and it has not taken into account the changes, particularly psychology and sociology. It has remained very conservative in general, and more specific laws on women. For instance, Article 218 of the Penal Code talks about violence in general. It does not specify violence against women. It does not talk violence. So this article stipulates that, for example, if a person commits violence against a partner, commits violence against another person, so he will have imprisonment. Well, she said 3 years of violence, and that was a mistake. But the spouse abandons the complaint or drops the complaint, then there will be this article has been that if a woman decides to file a complaint, she'll have all the society and all the family against her, and if she's a victim and if she's accused of putting the father of the kids in prison, and that of all this violence. So this is the kind of discourse that you would hear. And here I'm asking, I wonder, marriage, what is the definition of marriage actually in our legislation? It's a complaint, then she will not have the same rights as a woman who is not married. A single woman, her would-be husband, if she's aggressed physically, but a married woman would have, or she has, less rights than a single woman. I told you that I'm going to also talk about the sexual violence. Article violence or deals with sexual violence, but our legislator doesn't use the term rape and thinks sexual acts. It never uses the term rape. And the punishment for rape, if this rape is coupled with violence or with threats, is the death penalty. But for our legislator also, if this sexual intercourse is not a violent one coupled with violence, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, is not coupled with violence, then our legislator, for an important sanction or a heavy sanction against this kind of aggression, But at the 15 and 18 years, then, and if the victim accepts sanctions, will be dropped and the perpetrator will not be sent to prison. And now I wonder what the legislator means by marriage. The connotation is later uses in the same sentence the terms aggressor, victim, and marriage. I think that this is very serious indeed, and because the punishment for this is no longer punished, but is rewarded. So if the victim is a woman, and if the woman accepts to marry the perpetrator, some pressure on the lady to accept violence, then there will be no punishment, and asks for divorce within less than 2 years, and here is the victims and the aggressors would remain together for 2 years with all such a situation of violence and prejudice, both moral, physical, and also sexual, particularly rape as a sexual act, and sodomy. There is because in sodomy there is no virginity, there is no honor for the family, there is no pregnancy. So this reason that, and it is for this, kids, for young boys, because there is no virginity, no honor, etc. No loss of virginity, in fact. It talks about sexual abuse on children done or perpetrated by a person. It also talks about sexual abuse made by parents or grandfathers, and also that there are other people who can have access to the privates in them. But in the same article, they talk about dentists, about doctors, but they dolls and brothers. And I think that incest or sexual the impact of such an aggression would be extremely. This is done by a father or an uncle, or then the consequences would even be more dangerous because the Ministry of Women working currently on a project on a new law which addresses this kind of violence, and this is a law which is intended for women. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very sensitive issue, and to show us that Tunisia take this problem into account. I think that the debate will also more on this, and I would like to give the floor to Asha to give her presentation. Thank you. Bonjour, j'espère. Vous avez entendu des
qu'on n'a pas rencontré, qu'on n'a pas vu. Nous avons. J'ai discuté avec mon ami du conséquence du changement climatique, quel est l'impact donc du changement climatique sur l'économie en eau. Nous devons donc examiner toutes ces questions-là parce que nous sommes de nos familles, nous sommes celles qui ramènent l'eau. Et donc la France a été impliquée de façon efficace. Avec les efforts qui ont commencé en 1997, il y a eu plusieurs en Afrique de l'Ouest. Là, donc elles sont très actives. Elles organisent une réunion annuelle Donc il y a une réunion annuelle qui se tient en Afrique chaque mois de février pour pouvoir l'Afrique de l'Est. L'Afrique de l'Est est impliquée de façon efficace. Il y a également concernée la Fédération africaine et elles sont très actives. Et puis cette réunion, où nous avons une congrégation importante et nous avons convenu donc les avantages de la Confédération africaine. Quels sont ces avantages? Mais si je pose, parce qu'il faut tout d'abord améliorer notre visibilité en Afrique toute seule. En ce qui concerne le changement climatique de mon pays, il y a un projet qui est connaître ce qui se passe au niveau de la région pour pouvoir travailler ensemble. Donc, nous devons partager et le point très puissant d'autres et en grand nombre d'autres pays n'ont pas assez de nombre. Donc, il faudra pas moins aller de l'avant, comment progresser. Dans mon pays, maintenant, nous avons 12 clubs. Et moi, donc, ces clubs ont été confrontés à des problèmes, mais ces clubs essayent de progresser. Il faut membres. Il y a des femmes qui viennent juste pour observer. J'ai rencontré, je les ai encouragés à se joindre à ces clubs-là, parce que bien sûr, si nous avons des jeunes qui étaient grâce à ces technologies-là au monde, il y a beaucoup de potentiel en Afrique. Nous devons, en nos compétences, nous allons réussir parce qu'il y a beaucoup de choses qui se passent. Il y a beaucoup d'informations par ce qui se passe, c'est que nous allons obtenir des informations d'ailleurs et pas de nous-mêmes. Ce qui est important, c'est là financièrement stable et pourra organiser des forums comme celui-ci où les femmes peuvent participer, où on pourra parler des ressources en eau, où on pourra éduquer les gens sur les ressources en eau. Nous l'avons commencé grâce à un forum comme celui-ci en 2006 et l'un des délégués a décédé à décembre et ceci a changé la vie des jeunes filles. Donc c'est un fonds il y a des jeunes filles maintenant qui font des mathématiques et donc d'assurer une stabilité financière afin d'améliorer la vie des potentiels. Lorsqu'on améliore les conditions de vie des femmes, ces femmes-là vont contribuer de façon efficace parce que chaque femme a quelque chose à faire partager. Leadership. Et je suis reconnaissante. J'ai commencé en tant que membre du club. Mais j'ai été à des forums comme celui-ci. Il y a eu donc la Fédération européenne qui a aidé à renforcer les capacités des femmes africaines. En Afrique, donc, il y a un problème. Nous avons que 3 syndicats. Et donc, il n'y a pas assez de membres. Mais si on continue à recruter, renforcer nos capacités, donc augmenter les membres des différents clubs. Les clubs africains sont affiliés à la fédération. Ils ont un gros pas de travail. Donc, et j'espère qu'à la fin de cette réunion, et quitter cette salle pour devenir des ambassadrices et dire à nos sœurs, nous devons parce que nous avons besoin de femmes et qui doivent faire avancer ces questions-là. Il faut donc avoir la chance d'aller jusqu'aux Nations Unies. Si nous avons donc une fédération africaine et qui soit robuste, donc nous pouvons faire avancer. Ils pourront nous écouter parce que nous sommes tous des femmes, des professionnels. Parler de beaucoup de choses. Ici, nous rassemblons tous nos efforts, on pourra traiter beaucoup notre économie. On pourra traiter des questions telles que les changements climatiques, des questions relatives à l'économie, à l'éducation. C'est pour cette raison que nous devons nous rassembler nos efforts. Donc, les femmes africaines, on ne se connaissent pas assez. Donc, il faudrait faire avancer d'un réseautage entre nous. Maintenant, nous pourrons avoir des programmes d'échange importants. Si vous êtes membre, je peux vous... Donc, c'est une organisation qui pourra nous rassembler en tant que sœur internationale. Je suis là. Une femme qui m'a ouvert les bras, qui m'a ouvert sa maison, et c'est unique. Aucune organisation ne pourra... Je peux parler et parler, mais il faudra m'arrêter à un moment ou à un autre. Les efforts à élaborer une constitution qui a été élue en Nairobi et à la tête de ces efforts, ils ont élaboré, rédigé une constitution. Il faut que tous les clubs réagissent pour que tout le monde puisse savoir ce qui se passe. Au niveau de l'Afrique, nous devons savoir ce qui se passe. Et nous devons augmenter le nombre de nos adhérents. Donc, il ne faut pas faire partager uniquement les chiffres, mais surtout les informations. Il faut qu'on numéro de téléphone, nos emails. Par exemple, s'il y a un problème au niveau d'un club, si le club est confronté à certaines difficultés, il faut que nous fassions de notre mieux pour l'aider. Donc, pourquoi est-ce que tel ou tel club recule? J'étais à Marrakech, au Maroc, à travers Facebook. Les médias sociaux sont un outil très puissant et de contact. Donc, si vous êtes connecté à Facebook, vous pouvez avoir beaucoup d'informations et pouvez, par exemple, entrer en contact avec le Caire à travers Facebook. N'utilisons pas les technologies, on sera toujours à la traîne. Pour nous, en Afrique, nous avons tout. Il ne faut pas avoir peur de vos rêves. Donc, le rêve est devenu réalité. Nous avons mis en place, nous allons organiser une réunion à Pretoria l'année prochaine, au mois de mars. La Task Force. Et il ne faut pas nous devons être bien représentés. Donc, nous devons entreprendre les étapes nécessaires pour rassembler tout le monde. La partie est de l'Afrique et la partie nord de l'Afrique, c'est pour rassembler tout le monde et nous laisser traiter de toutes les questions pour pouvoir aller de l'avant. Si vous avez une question, il faut discuter. Sinon, si nous n'avons pas de fédération, les sœurs de l'Europe nous ont toujours soutenus. On nous a toujours soutenus. Maintenant, il est temps pour nous d'avoir une fédération. Il faut aller de l'avant. Il faut grandir. Parce que nous avons toujours été une sorte de mentor. Eh bien, les fédérations ont leurs propres défis, mais nous devons apprendre. La fédération, qui a une fédération mère, SIE, la Grande-Bretagne, elles sont là pour nous aider à grandir, à renforcer nos capacités. Il faut... Parce que donc nous devons être assez puissants financièrement pour avoir une fédération. Mais notre vision n'est pas claire. Beaucoup de clubs ne communiquent pas, beaucoup de clubs ont des difficultés. Le problème en Afrique, c'est la communication. Nous ne communiquons pas, nous restons tranquilles. Vous leur parlez des différents défis, leur demandez ce qu'elles ont fait. Donc il faut communiquer davantage, il faut se réunir. absurde. Il faut parler de vos peurs. Il ne faut pas avoir peur de vos peurs et de vos craintes. Merci.
Parmi le doigt déjà sur des problèmes que nous aurons à discuter. Il n'y a pas le micro. Il y a, on entend un bruit. C'est la climatisation. C'est la climatisation. OK. OK, on peut continuer.
On your behalf, Asha, who has pointed out the problems that to discuss after the reports, and we hope that at the end, tomorrow we will have recommendations, and that each of you will bring with her Asha. So how much time do we have? It is 1:30, 1 hour. We have a whole hour to discuss. Christian, please, I would ask Mariette and the chance to introduce her. She's the president of Central and Western Africa and the president of the Union, who takes part actively. Please participate. And then Touria Benedine, the president, the founding director or president of Morami. Before we open the debate, allow me to ask. Please introduce yourselves so that we can see who you are. Can you use the microphone, please? You can see. Good morning, my sisters. The vice president of the Flamboyant Club of Abidjan. I'm among you here today for the. Okay, and that's it. Your neighbor. Okay, these are people whom we have invited. There are no new sisters. Can you use the microphone, please? Microphone, please. Asha, we need ambassadors, and in Tunisia there are people who are interested. Can you use the microphone, please? Welcome, sisters who feel interested in optimism. Let me give the floor to our facilitator, who will she discussions that we will have.
Bonjour. Nous allons commencer par ouvrir la session de débat et je propose que chaque pays ait une porte-parole pour nous donner une idée sur les actions à entreprendre après cette réunion. Et demain, nous aurons donc les résumés de ces recommandations pour aboutir à première version de ces recommandations, et donc on pourra donner la parole à tous les membres.
The setting is ready, I think, and does anyone want to take the floor? First of all, I would like to give the floor some kind of guidelines, and she has a number of questions that could help us frame our discussion.
J'ai quelques questions à soulever. Je ne sais pas si on peut les avoir sur PowerPoint. On va essayer de partager des réponses à ces questions. Une des questions est comment est-ce qu'on pourra augmenter les membres pour l'Afrique en communication et comment améliorer les états financiers des clubs pour la participation, comment assurer la participation de les quels efforts pouvons-nous faire pour améliorer l'éducation et le nombre renforcer nos services et particulièrement. Cela était quelques questions pour la discussion, pour alimenter la discussion et peut-être qu'à la fin qui seront adaptées et on choisira les meilleures réponses. Donc on aura donc une...
Merci beaucoup. Alors, merci beaucoup à Asha.
Thank you very much, Asha, because this is going to give a framework for our discussion and to avoid those issues which... So, I will ask the facilitator to take the names of the list. Will be long, but we have 1 hour, so let's take the names first. Let's take 5 first.
S'il vous plaît, votre attention, s'il vous plaît.
Your attention, please, of our meeting, and each of you has the right and the obligation to take part and participate. Organized by the northern and eastern region, but we have also come from other regions to bring our contribution. This debate reflects the contribution of all the regions, and we will... okay.
Égypte, Côte d'Ivoire 3 et le Maroc.
So let's start with the persons who have the floor to others also.
Yes.
Du Maroc, Touria.
Ladies, good morning. Touria Bimbin. I have already been introduced. I am the founder of Optimists Morocco. We had our chart 14 years ago. There's a major shortcoming. We have 4 clubs, and the major shortcoming is that we don't communicate with each other and actually don't communicate with other countries in Africa. Morocco takes part in a meeting for the new federation, Shore Optimist Africa. And I find it that extremely interesting that Madagascar has opened the streaming. So that, for us in Morocco, before we could do it, I already started to call all Moroccan clubs, Agadir, Rabat, Casablanca, to does very interesting things. We have built a dome for rural girls to allow who live in the mountains and rural areas and who don't have secondary schools in their region. To allow these girls at the age of 11 or 12 and who otherwise would have been working in the masters, they're postgraduate students in different disciplines. Like this is one thing about the club. We have 3 pharmacists and 3 doctors or hospitals, and we have examined between 800 and 1,500 ambulance. We have, for example, met an 18-year-old girl who has been diagnosed. I think that these are things that we should communicate and disseminate, and we should, as Asha said, Asha didn't know it. We are for a long time. It has just rained for 1 hour since the beginning of winter. We don't have enough water, of course, and this is, even Moroccans don't know about this. And Aisha has well stated that each of us can disseminate her experience and tell others about what the club is doing. Not that large, so I'm suggesting that Tunisia and we can integrate the African Union also in a more appropriate manner. Or something practical, in fact. And this is something that we will try to talk about.